to our Tucson Village Gathering. We're so glad to have Erica McQuown joining us this morning. Erica has been an active supporter of mothers for about 3 years now through donation-based retreats in the Verde Valley. Her training is in the mind, body, spiritual healing through yoga and Ayurveda. And she's completed her doula training and also supported births. So she's not currently practicing right now, but she continues to support women with infertility issues. And she's also a mother herself of 2 and 1 on the way. We're so excited for you, Erica. Erica is going to be talking to us this morning about the transition from maiden to mother. So welcome, Erica. We're so glad to have you with us. Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an amazing resource for our community, and I'm really honored to be able to share today. So I thought I'd give a little outline of what I'd like to talk about today. Ayurveda and yoga is a confusing thing. So I'm going to first start off with what Ayurveda is. Most people can't even comprehend the word. So it's very new in this Western world. So we'll talk about that. And then the yoga I teach and I practice is off the mat. And it's largely misunderstood that yoga can both be on the mat and off the mat. So we'll spend a little bit of time with that. And then we'll talk about stories. So this archetypal transition from maiden to mother is in all cultures across the world. And I find that a lot of my teachings in yoga as well, there's a text I use in particular called Yoga Vashishtha, and all it is stories. And just as little kids relate to large concepts through stories, big people really are just little kids. And so, so we'll talk about this transition and my story and my transition from maiden to mother, because I think when creating a village, creating community, the more we can share our stories, the more we're able to connect. And then lastly, we'll go over the practical tips using both techniques from Ayurveda and yoga and where they overlap for anyone struggling with overwhelm, depression, anxiety, and just adapting to this new role of mother. And we'll talk about this new role of mother. Sarah, I'm sure you know, it comes with each new kid too. So it's not just the first time. There's a transition that comes each time the family's growing, the dynamics are shifting. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll monitor the chat on my side if we have any questions too, and I can look at that. All right, so I'm going to share with an overview. I do virtual consultations. One of the ways I've been able to integrate my work with motherhood, with having a family, is being able to work from home. I mean, COVID has just solidified this. It's fantastic. This is one of the benefits that have come out of it. And so I really like using this whiteboard, but bear with me because it's a little bit like chicken scratch, but it'll give us a visual of some of what we're talking about here today. All right. So what the heck is it that I do? Because we we think of mind, body, spirit, and it feels very elusive. And so I want to bring it down to what the history is and what yoga off the mat is. So in the indigenous cultures of India, some of the scholars will call it the Saraswati culture. There were 4 Vedic sciences. The one we know in the West is yoga. Ayurveda is what is starting to become known in the West, but it's still very new. Jyotish and Vastu. And these 2 we won't talk about too much, but essentially they're astrology and feng shui. So the science of keeping up the energy in your house and keeping aligned with moon cycles. I mean, women are so connected to the moon, whether we know it or not. This is an interesting facet, but star cycles, etc. Yoga is the science of our mind, and Ayurveda is the science of our body. And all of these really are interconnected. So yoga has made itself well known as a meditative exercise. We know this, but really the asanas are 1% of the practice of yoga. They're such a powerful aspect. And because Westerners are so physical, it's such an easy way for us to get into this ancient wisdom. But I just want to introduce that there's actually 4 types of yoga. And this is important for mothers because some of them are easier for us to relate to than getting on the mat. So they're called jnana, which is knowledge, bhakti, which is devotional. Raja is what we think of with breath practices and asana practices. And then karma. And karma yoga, just going to highlight here. Oh, let's try it again. Karma yoga is really like the route that mothers can take most easily, which is essentially yoga in its definition is union with our higher self, so with our spiritual self. So we talk mind, body, spirit, this, the still small voice, the intuition, however, whatever word we want to use, all of the words have some baggage. so whichever one carries the least amount of baggage. But karma yoga is how we can serve the divine, the higher self, etc., in our families. And this is what I teach when we do motherhood yoga retreats, is really how can we each step of our day come into alignment. And there's a whole technique for this. We won't go into all of this today. I just want to introduce this concept. Okay, so I spent the last 7 years studying by grace, with the ancient keepers of this knowledge. So I was going through my own dark night of the soul, and we'll talk about that a little bit in my story. Often motherhood triggers this dark night of the soul because it's so powerful and it can bring up all of our own wounds, and we have to see them. I studied this through traditional swamis. Swamis are monks. And where I teach now, these motherhood yoga retreats are at an ashram. This is actually where yoga came from. Most of us in the West don't know this. My journey was interesting because I started with infertility. And so I thought that that wasn't going to be a route for me. And so I was trying to find happiness in other ways. I had recently become engaged to my husband, who is the sweetest, most supportive man ever. And so he supported me to go on this pilgrimage to the Himalayas. I went up close to Tibet and studied with the swamis there. And much in the same way they teach there is what is being held at the ashram here in the Verde Valley. It's funny because 6 weeks before I left, I'm infertile, right? I found out I'm pregnant. So my story is, my whole story with Ayurveda comes later. We'll talk about this, about how yoga and Ayurveda intertwine with motherhood. And really, I can't tell you I chose this route. I can tell you I came into it. And so everything I share is with this special place for motherhood, because it's my journey. Okay, we did a little bit about what yoga is. Let's talk about what Ayurveda is. So the Sanskrit's the ancient language of India, similar to, let's say, like Latin or Greek. Ayur means life, and Veda means knowledge. It's how to live a long life, how to live a happy life, how to live a strong life, how to have a strong body during the various phases of life. So we see childhood, middle age, where most of us are now, and then after menopause, so the end of life. It's the ultimate mind-body medicine. Scholars disagree about the time frame, but most can say somewhere around 5,000 years old. It's just so amazing to me. I started my journey in the sciences. And so I love that the science now has studied the impact on the body and mind of yoga, and Ayurveda is shortly coming. So there's a lot of information out there about herbal usages. I mean, so much of it's lifestyle, like sleep correctly, poop correctly, manage your energy. We talk a lot about poop in Ayurveda, and mothers, you really need to know this. We don't really like to talk about it, but it's very important. And some of it's just super basic, but it's just so simple, we almost overlook it. But the NIH is now studying, let's say, the herbal compounds and more of these lifestyle recommendations in a way of optimizing our health. Ayurveda uses the yoga quite a bit as a way of treating underlying mental and emotional patterns that are the root cause for much of our stress. Mothers can often see chronic conditions come up as they're dealing with the stress of caring for their own family and not able to maintain the care of themselves. Usually there's some sort of emotional trigger that comes. The research now shows that up to 90% of our physical ailments are stress related. And it's really no different in the 1950s. There was a term called emotionally induced illness, and it was said that nearly 3/4 of hospital beds were filled because of emotionally induced illness. Stress is an elusive word. And so really there's some practical tips of how we can support our body. Often what we're really trying to do is down regulate from this fight or flight response to a more rest and digest. When you're in yoga and like the yoga class, the exercise class, and you get that high, it's because you're finally into this lower stress response. Just a little tidbit on what I do. So I studied, after I started yoga, I had my first child, and then I started in 2016 studying clinical yoga at the largest school in the US. I finished my clinical internship over the past year and a half. And in my my internship, I realized that only 5% of the issues, only 5% of what we need to do is tell someone what to do. The other 95% is helping them integrate. So I've created a program that targets the root cause of disease, largely beginning in the gut through poor eating habits and poor response to stressors. And a lot of this has to do with cultural programming. Like what we find is what we value is not aligned with what our bodies, our minds, and our families actually need. All right. So just a little plug, the results I've witnessed, Casey, she's so sweet. The results I've seen through this have been nothing short of miraculous. I'll share with my story. I also experienced this, like I said, from infertility to being able to have children. And although disease conditions may continue to be present, there's still damage to tissues. The quality of life can be dramatically improved through adoption of lifestyle and complementary treatments. So that's my little background of what I'm currently doing. So essentially, Ayurveda in a consultation program like this, and I'm supporting women in integrating yoga in their daily lives through the ashram program. And this is the donation-based program in Verde Valley. If you want any information, I don't know how to get this to you, but I can link you to the websites, etc. Really, the yoga retreat we want is because it was so powerful in my transition to mother, from maiden to mother, and the traditional yoga practices seem so, you have to be austere, you have to be in a mountaintop, you have to be in an ashram, and we've translated them to how you can do it in a busy household with screaming children and 5 minutes of alone time, if that. So how can you do your breath body practices while you're driving in the car, etc.? And so there's this weekend is a way to teach us to mother, and we want it to be donation based so that anyone can come and join. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit today next about archetypal stories. And the story is a transition from maiden to mother, which is pre-kids, after kids. I have a slight obsession with the power of stories. I think for this part, I don't need my whiteboard. So I'm going to take my whiteboard off, and then I'll put it back on for the practical part. Okay, so I have an obsession with the power of stories. I'll share my story so that what we're saying, what I'm sharing with you, it comes from experience. It is possible. Often when we say it's possible to be happy as a mother, it feels like you're being dismissive of the current experience. And I'm very familiar, you'll see through my story, of anxiety, depression, PTSD. I had all sorts of physical ailments. And so I want you to know through my story that what I share as practical resources is is taking into account all of these other things we may be battling against. This is even possible for busy people. It's possible to have peace. It's possible to grow into a stronger version of yourself as a mother than you were prior, because often this is what I hear, is that I didn't know how hard it was. I feel like I've lost myself completely. And there's a reason why this is shared in indigenous cultures about this great transformation. All right, so I spent my early 20s as an overachieving and underperforming. I was at university. I had poorly managed ADD. I had no lifestyle skills. I had zero healthy habits, and ended up, I had this wonderful opportunity. I spent actually a lot of time doing research projects and studying abroad. And the second one I went to was in Spain. And at the time, they have a nationalist group that was had a terrorist element to it, and they were blowing up buildings. And I didn't quite know how to handle this. So I came back, and this is, triggers my dark night of the soul, because my brain was completely fried. I had PTSD. They had blown up the building right next to my school, and like my poor nervous system being this, I was 20. Yeah, I was 20 when I came back. And I didn't know how to handle it. And so I had been doing the regular route, and I was on meds, and it was fine. I felt like I was just coming back up over this hump. I had met my husband, who I've mentioned is like super supportive. And a week after we got engaged, I had been having all of these hormonal issues. And so the doctor had said I likely would suffer from infertility. I had been diagnosed with PCOS, and there was just some severe hormone imbalances. There was hypothyroidism, cholesterol, there was autoimmune thyroid, like literally everything had piled on over these few years. And when I look back at it, it becomes really clear, especially now with my training in Ayurveda, that it was first this nervous system, mental, emotional, that then led to this physical manifestation. I didn't know this at the time. It was a week after we had been engaged. This was like devastating news. And I felt like I had slowly been crawling my way out of, I was about 24 at this time. I'd slowly been crawling my way out of this heavy depression, this having to review all of these wounds, essentially. And I started, there were little angels that like kept popping up in the way that, I can see now. I didn't see them then, but, and one of them, I began working with a naturopath. So we worked on diet, and amazingly, like all of my physical symptoms had been reversed. So I had lost weight, hormones were balanced. As far as I could tell, I still couldn't have kids, but I wasn't trying at this point. We figured it would be a little bit of a wait. At this time, yoga also came around, and one of my first yoga teachers at Yoga Flow, which is no longer there, but it's in Tucson. So my ties are to Tucson. My husband and I met in Tucson. We have lots of family there. I now live in Phoenix, but obviously I serve all of Arizona. So we're up in the Verde Valley and down Tucson and here. So there's an Ayurvedic practitioner. It was like the first time I had ever heard about this. And she just had, so like right now I'm having nettle tea. I don't know if you've heard of this. I'll type it in the chat. It's fantastic for supporting women. She had recommended this and a couple of other really small changes. And it was the first seed that was planted. I mean, I didn't really think much of it. But I knew that I was starting to feel better and feel more ease. And then there was a Swami that came, and Swami, S-W-A-M-I, is a term for a monk, which we talked about. This is where yoga was traditionally taught. And so I followed him to India. I was so grateful through these practices that I began to find life. I felt like I was alive. I felt like I wasn't just trudging through water. So like I said, I was pregnant. And so this was the beginning. I kept feeling like this is where the spiritual aspect I feel like is so important for mothers to connect to, because I kept feeling like there are roadblocks, but if you can see it from this higher vision, you can start to see how it's aligning you to your life path. And I feel like motherhood is the first thing that comes that really like you have very little control over. I mean, there can be medical issues, there can be issues with your kids, you can be the most regimented person, and it just may not happen with children. And so it can really be the first time you have to learn how to surrender and see this bigger picture. So I had signed up for yoga teacher training because I was like, I want to teach people this. So I was, I don't know, 6 months pregnant with, or my daughter was 6 months old. And I was breastfeeding and it just wasn't going to work. So the type of yoga I study is classical yoga. It's called Shivananda. It's through a lineage that's been practiced all the way back to a sage called Shankara. So, I mean, thousands of years is what it said. So this is the traditional way of teaching yoga, teacher to student. And so I wanted to go to the specific yoga teacher training, and with breastfeeding, it wasn't going to happen. I was super disappointed. I'm like, but listen, this is my path. Like yoga is my path. And so we decided, okay, let's study Ayurveda because I can integrate yoga in this medical field in this way. So it was a 3-year program. It's called a clinical Ayurvedic specialist. And then I did an internship after. In the meantime, I signed up in between my children for another yoga teacher training. And again, I fell pregnant. And it's not that I didn't want to, it's just that I didn't quite think it would happen the time it did. And so I had reached out to the Swami who runs this yoga teacher training, asking if I could go. And she says, absolutely not. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, I'm only 3 months pregnant. There's no reason why I can't do a yoga teacher training at this point. I had the support of my family, to watch my oldest daughter. And she taught me a super valuable lesson that motherhood is a time for nourishment. And there are other times in your life for austerity. So there's essentially 2 paths of healing, austerity and nourishment. And I didn't really understand it at that time, but it's come to infiltrate so much of what I offer to mothers now. Because we're so used to, especially in our culture, burning the candle at both ends to perform more, to produce more. And really, this theme keeps coming back of nourishment, because only by nourishing yourselves can you nourish your family, and you really can't, this cliche of you can't pour from an empty cup. So anyways, this was my first really hard lesson into it. So I cried and cried and cried. And the Swami I've been working with, that I went to India with, he says, okay, let's do a yoga teacher training. And he guided me step by step for 2 months. So instead of a month program, it took 2 months, and we did it from home. And so it wasn't through an accredited, but this way I got all of the information. And so it's funny because it turns out that my way of relaying the wisdom of yoga is really on those other 3 paths of yoga, the ones that are really not seen. So the jnana, the knowledge, the bhakti, and the karma. And so the 3 years I've been offering these motherhood yoga retreats. And the theme keeps coming is, as modern mothers, it feels like we're faced with a seemingly impossible task. But here I'm going to argue that through my experience and through theoretical training, that our current situation is actually perfect for our optimal growth into our fullest selves. This archetypal transition from maiden to mother is described in Jungian philosophy. Carl Jung, I think there's a movie out about him. But really, it's ingrained in all the stories from the beginning of time. It's a human story, and it's really from a maiden to a warrior. And it requires a huge shift to taking on full responsibility and full self-empowerment for our experience. I share this story, again, I said at the beginning, not so that the tips I offer are not coming from a judgmental place. Because when I say it's super important to find space, to find quiet, and you tell me I can't, I have 3 screaming kids, I know. I know, but there's super creative ways for integrating this into this daily life. Sarah says the book Ancient Map for Modern Birth by Pam England. Yes. Yes. There's also a book that's slightly, it goes into more of the women's transition. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. Yes. And that one is Clarissa Parks or Clarissa, something like this. You can find it. Yeah. Yes. Great. So yoga philosophy offers a way out of this. I'm resonating mostly here with the women who are going through a difficult time in this transition. So it offers a way out, and Ayurveda is the medical science behind it that gives us the optimal biochemistry to support your path to feeling free from all that keeps us stuck and drowning. All right, so we'll go into some practical tips here. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. So I write for when I can. It's really hard to stick to a schedule, but City Moms blog, Phoenix. So I write for them. So I wrote this essentially in a blog. If you can Google that, the same story I'm going to share here. Oh no, I logged out of my meeting. Let me see so I can share this whiteboard. And we'll go into these practicals. Can you just let me in, whoever's my second screen here? Thank you. All right. So the first is, yes, it's really hard. Motherhood is spiritual boot camp for the uninitiated. And let's define what spirituality is. And so my first recommendation is getting in touch with spirit. And so most medical professionals can't tell you this. So that's what this is an interesting aspect, is they can't tell you that this is a really important part of your healing. And so let's define what I mean by spirituality. There's lots of words that can really weigh heavy. So, God is particularly one of these. So I just invite you to sit with whatever discomfort comes from whatever word we're using here, and know that there's lots of ways to relate to this. Sarah's book that she mentioned, Ancient Map for Modern Birth, will go into another way of talking about this too. The yoga way is essentially that we have 2 selves. We have our lower self with a small s, and a capital S is our higher self. And that higher self is our intuition, this connection with a higher power, etc. If we have not been connected with this, we will often, not always, but this often is an experience that will be brought to our knees, and that we need to figure out how to relate to this aspect of ourselves. In order to do this, we must adopt what's called a growth mindset. So growth versus fixed. Fixed mindset meaning this is the way I am, this is my personality, this is who I'll always be. And it's not helpful in our path to exploration. We really want to see that we can grow, and we can grow into this person that life is asking us to be. We have this wonderful privilege of being a mother, and I know sometimes it doesn't always feel this way. It can feel very burdensome, but But if we want to be happy, which is really what we want, looking into this growth mindset, how can I begin to align all aspects of myself, of this lower self and this higher self? And so if we think of this as spiritual boot camps, this is also where we think of it as a warrior. Oh, thank you for checking on Nettle. It's safe for breastfeeding, very low risk. Yeah, traditionally it's recommended for women in all aspects. Okay, so growth versus fix. If we think of ourselves as this is boot camp, if you were to go to boot camp for the military, you don't just show up without any preparation. You're feeding yourself good food, you're getting good sleep, you're really taking your job seriously, because the other side is you're gonna get wiped out. So first, just having the mental strength and stamina, mentally first, say, I can do this, lots of affirmations, and whoever appeals to you as a good guide, someone that's always seemed really optimistic, that would be the person to follow to help keep your growth going. The second thing to discuss is the shift continues. With your partner, with your children, and with those around you. It's not a one and done. It's not like, I think we talk a lot about this in the other meetings that we've had, the community gatherings here that we've had, is the question was posed, how long is postpartum? Is it 10 days? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 9 months? And really it just continues. I love this view, again, in the story archetypal description of Earth as a school, and you have to have tests, and you don't go from one grade to the next without it being difficult. And there's a gradation, and you keep learning your deeper and deeper lessons, and they will feel like the world is working against you if you don't adapt this growth, this growth mindset, and that there's a higher self that is guiding this process for your own good. There's a quote, they attribute quotes to all sorts of people, but there's a quote attributed to Albert Einstein that says, you can experience life as if everything is a miracle or as if nothing is. And I haven't verified this quote, I don't know if it's him, but I love the sentiment. I love the sentiment, because really, what's your other option? Because if we start feeling that the world is just like against us, we're going to feel awful. And I know this because I was there. Like I in my depressions, in my anxieties, I just felt like the world was against me. And I felt like I was the victim to all of these external circumstances. And so really seeing it as a test, seeing it as a warrior, allowing the shift to continue, and remembering that it's growth and a higher self guiding you. And I use higher self as the yoga term, but there's many ways of relating to this. I also say, I think we've talked a little bit about this, about with the partner, is that this shifts with the partner. So your partner's also going to grow as much as you are, and it may be at different paces. And so allowing that. And they may not be able to express them. There's more and more of these groups for mothers, but there's not as much for fathers. We've started to integrate this at the ashram and these yoga retreats, because there's fathers that are feeling just as lost as you are in their role, or partners, or however our family is set up. Okay. So the third recommendation is to create space. I love that we started this, our opening icebreaker was, what is your favorite element? I actually forgot to say mine, but my favorite element is space. Because so there's the 5 elements, space, air, water, fire, and earth. Space allows for transformation to happen. There's a beautiful book I read. I do a lot of audiobooks. And there's one on, it's called Margin. I'll just write it here. He's an MD. He comes from a Christian background, which can be triggering for some, but you don't really realize that till like, well into the book. But he talks about the stress that used to happen when we were working in the fields was a physical stress, but it didn't affect our physiology the way our mental stress does. And he treats patients all day long. And what he's finding is they don't have margin. Margin being another word for space between events. As a mother, I mean, you know this, you barely wake up. You don't even wake up. You get woken up by your kids. And then especially if you're working, I mean, you're trying to shift from work to kid to, food. Like, how can you possibly think of yourself and food in between of all of these other unpredictable events happening? And what he says is even not just in mothers, but in all chronic conditions, it's this lack of margin. We've become so obsessed with thinking constantly. Yes, especially during the pandemic, yes, because we were piling everything on top of each other. Yes, no siesta. Gosh, and mothers need siestas. But what he's finding is, so there's this, if there's another wonderful neuroscientist, I'm going to put his name in here, and it's a slight tangent, but it's going to relate back. His name is Andrew Huberman. He also studies eyes. He's a very interesting guy. He has a podcast, and he talks a lot about the neuroscience of this. And so what I'm going to say is a super basic understanding of the science, but follow him for more in depth, is that we have two modes of our nervous system. And one is the parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. And the other is our sympathetic, which is our fight or flight. And mothers are always in this fight or flight. And the way to get out of it is to create space. We can create space with our breath. And this is something we can do anytime. So I'm going to draw you a little human here. So this is your human. This body is your physical body. And in yoga, we have several bodies. Here is your mental body. So this is your mind. This is what you're hearing. This is all the mental chatter you're hearing. And our breath, so we'll go like this. Have it go in and out. This up and down. This breath is what connects the mind and the physical body. So if we want our nervous system to downshift, if we want to experience some margin, if we want to experience some space, we slow down our breath. And one of the ways we can do that is by a deep 3-part belly breath. And the way this works is that usually when we're in anxiety and we're not experiencing any margin, not any space, we're breathing into our chest, like right up here. And that's going to create more anxiety. So a simple technique is learning how to breathe down into your belly, and then to your lower lungs, and then to your upper lungs. So I'm going to guide us through that. We'll just guide it through once, and so we can experience this. So just take a regular inhale and exhale, come into your body. And then we'll control the breath in this way. We're going to pull it all the way down so our belly extends. And then second, we'll feel our ribs expand. And then third and last, we'll have it come into our chest. And when we exhale, we'll have it come slowly out of our chest. Our ribs will come in, we'll push it out of our ribs, and then bring your belly button all the way back to your spine. So on the inhale, into your belly, lower ribs, upper chest, and feel that chest expand. And exhale the chest, exhale the lower ribs, and exhale the belly. One more time. Inhale the belly, expand the belly, expand the lower ribs, and expand the upper chest. And exhale out of the lower ribs and out of the belly. This is a very different breathing. I would say 50% of consultations I offer for Ayurveda is, how are you breathing? Oh, I forgot. Oh, I forgot. Oh, I forgot. So set a reminder. They have these really nice apps now on your phone to not breathe into the chest and to breathe into the belly. That's one way of creating margin is through the breath. Oh, here. Another way of creating margin is through replacing thoughts with a mantra. A mantra can be a Sanskrit mantra, or it can be, often this is a really simple one, I am safe. Because much of what runs our incessant thoughts are some element of feeling of unsafety. In Ayurveda, we have the 3 doshas, which are, I'll write them here, and they're not super important, but if you followed Ayurveda, this is for you. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Vata relates to the air. And mothers usually are out of balance in Vata dosha. And this is our minds that are constantly running. It's also our nervous systems, our circadian rhythms out of balance. And this is all going to aggravate Vata. So we can replace these incessant thoughts with an affirmation thought. And even if we don't believe it, it works in 2 ways. It works, 1, by blocking out the other thoughts, and 2, by uplifting the thoughts. And so I share this because it seems crazy and overly simple, and yet it really, really works. over time. So these are 2 for creating space that can be implemented anytime when you're breastfeeding. There's some deeper pranayama techniques, which I can share in the chat here, on a loma or alternate nostril. You can find a YouTube video on these. They can be done while you're breastfeeding, and they balance both sides of your body. So your active response and your passive response, and these can be super balancing. Oh, Megan, I realize I'm just responding to you, and I'm so glad you're repeating this to everyone. Thank you. So this the alternate nostril, the right and the left hemispheres of the body. It's said that there's 2 channels running up and down your spine, and so eventually you can start to feel the breath going up and down your spine. I love this with both of my daughters while I was breastfeeding because you can't do anything else. You can hardly go get a glass of water or any food. And so when you start to feel this like suffocating, overwhelming aspect, then you can always come back to this alternate nostril breath. How am I in time? Because it's 11 already. I can make it quicker, or I can just wanted to see where I'm at.
Yeah, you're good on time. You can, if we leave a little bit of time at the end, you have about 15 more minutes.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So alternate nostrils, so I'll just spend a couple extra minutes. I'm not going to show you the technique, but it's worth looking up on YouTube and practicing with. Is there's an inhale, you close one side of your nostril, inhale, close the other side, and an exhale. So you're isolating each nostril. It's said, interestingly enough, that I think even our modern science is saying this, that each hour we shift which side of the nose we're breathing from, which is just fascinating. Every time I can link up the ancient knowledge with anything modern, this is my nerd. This is where I geek out. All right. So the next recommendation I have here is find your village. even if you don't think you need one. That's what I love so much about this program. Find your village, tell others about the village. Most of what we're suffering from, this is why it's an archetypal story, is so universal if we only knew it. There's more and more awareness is coming. I birthed my children in New Mexico, so Pam England was quite renowned there, and there is a wonderful group of women then, and take what you need and leave the rest. But really, the more that you can find support, you'll find also your partner finds support in this. I know Elizabeth Wood does a really nice group, and I've mostly heard about the partners talking about that. The partners are saying, I didn't know. I didn't know there's this transition. I didn't know that my wife's sex drive goes down and that's totally normal and it's not me. And she's, because there can be all of these really complicated emotions that come because you're transitioning, and due to your transition, the rest of the family unit is transitioning. And really, if we can see how powerful our own experiences and how that ripples out this butterfly effect, because I've seen my own husband, it'll affect his work, right? They'll like, if there's these emotional, tricky things to follow that are tricky emotions to navigate, it'll affect his work. So the more you can like take responsibility for yourself and find as much support as you can for your own transition, you're also supporting those around you. And so much of this can feel selfish. It can feel, I'm taking time out, I'm taking, there's so many duties when you're running a household, and it can feel like you're neglecting some of that by going out to support groups or stopping your day here for an hour and a half. It's not selfish. If you could really see how this butterfly effect manifests, it's really worth your time. And then find others that tell you you're not crazy for your experience. That's part of this, is that the number one thing I hear at the motherhood retreats. I wish someone would have told me how hard this was. And it is, and it's transformative. All right, so on the super practical grounds here is your diet matters. We talked about being a warrior, and warriors are not going to try and get back, 10 pounds less than they were. They are going to go out as strong as they possibly can and trust that their body is going to take the shape it needs to in order to support facing, enemy fire here. And your enemy fire is your everyday life. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's a yogic text. Megan says, as a nutrition student, I couldn't agree more. Yes. I know that there's been some other speakers that will go some more details into the actual nutrition of this, but I can give you a general outline today from an Ayurvedic perspective. But your diet matters. And if you're going to go out into the battlefield, the Bhagavad Gita is a yogic classic. So we would consider it like the Iliad or something like this from our Western world. And it's the story of Arjuna, who is out in the battlefield and he doesn't want to fight. He's like most mothers that many mothers, this is much of our experience, which is like, I can't do this today. This is too much. I don't have it in me. I'm exhausted. So check in. Where is your breath? And have you eaten? You need fats and proteins. You need the things that are going to sustain you. It's not the time to cut calories. The biggest thing you can do is, if you're worried about it, because of course we also want to think clearly. And Ayurveda talks a lot about the relationship between what's in our food and our mental state. So this is where the push for vegetarianism can come from, but really it's just plant-based. So as many plants, phytonutrients as you can, because the plants, or you can say phytonutrients, are what give our cells intelligence. But if you can't do that, start with your fats and proteins because this is going to give you the stamina. There is a brilliant researcher named Dr. Deanna, and she does the rainbow diet, and I really like her because it's not constricting in any way, but it talks about how having a really diverse palate. I could say, you know, your baby, we may have talked about this in different, your baby can taste what you're eating. So if you want your kids to have a really good palate and have this healthy lifestyle, then eat what you want them to eat, because they'll start to taste it if you're breastfeeding. But also just in general, if they're seeing you eat it, then that's what they're going to consider normal. So I think that is what I have for today. Yeah. Do we have any questions here?
Yeah, let's open it up for discussion and questions, and we will stay on Facebook Live for just a bit longer, and then we'll pop off if anybody has any, personal questions.
Right.
Yeah. So does anybody, you can feel free to speak up now or use your hand raise button, whatever you feel comfortable with to get Erica's attention.
Let's see. Great.
Well, Jenny, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is all really fascinating to me, especially the concept of margins and having to take that space, because I think, I guess I don't know if everyone else feels this way, but as a mother, when I know that I need space and time alone, I feel almost guilty for it, right? Even though that I know that it's necessary for my, survival and treating my children well and being a good mother. My husband even knows it. He'll send me away for the weekend fairly frequently, because he recognizes when you come back, things are better. But yeah, I think there's this level of guilt with well, how could you be a good mother if you actually don't want to be around your family for a little while? And, I guess I've over the years learned to sort of live with it, because I'm still doing that. But it's interesting how our culture hasn't really acknowledged that as a necessary, valuable thing for women.
Yeah, definitely. Women seem to be the canary in the coal mine, but for all of us, because we just value so much productivity. But they've done a lot of studies on meditation, and they really see that productivity goes up with more mental clarity. So we just have to ingrain that in a little bit deeper. Teach our kids, the next generation.
Yeah, it does seem like I have 3 boys, so I'm hoping that them watching me take time for myself is going to encourage them to do that for their partners and for themselves.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
I wanted to piggyback on what Jenny said, that I am blessed to have an amazing female village. And I remember having to say to my kid, they're like, well, why isn't daddy going? I'm like, well, he wasn't invited. And, that's part of life. It's not that I loved him any less. It's not that I didn't want to be with him. But, it's something that they just got used to. And I pray that that's kind of what they took on into their relationships. But I also wanted to thank you so much for talking, Erica, about Earth is a test, and that we can't move forward until we figure this one out. Because I've had stuff in my life that you get little knocks and then you get a brick and you're out. And you're like, I should have seen that coming. Well, you did see it coming. You ignored it, because I got to get up. I got to go to work. I got to pick up the kids. So I really appreciate that one. I wrote down some notes, especially about that one. So thank you, Erica.
My mom always she says, I seem to have an affinity for getting hit over the head with a 2x4. I don't get the whispers. I get the 2x4, but that's it. Yes.
She got the whispers.
Yeah, exactly. She ignored him. This is where space comes in, because if we have that space, the whispers seem a little bit louder, and we can hear them as they come then.
I love
Yeah.
that, Erica. And I have to agree with Eileen. Like I think I push everything down, the little inner voices, right? And those little whispers. But I also just hand in hand, I felt like the illustration of boot camp, and like, you don't just walk into boot camp one day. Like, you're preparing yourself, you're taking time to realize where you're going mentally and physically. You can't just walk off the street and expect to succeed in something as heavy as boot camp. And I think motherhood especially embodies that heaviness of, what are we doing in our pregnancies? What are we doing even before our pregnancies to prepare for that? Because then that's the whisper, and we're just shoving it aside to continue on our day-to-day life like we're not pregnant, like we're not preparing, we're not in this time frame that we need to be preparing more. And then we walk into our postpartum already fatigued, already depleted, already exhausted, because we didn't try to create that space, but the world around us is just telling us, like, keep going, keep pushing, keep pushing. And so I think this kind of concept of slowing down and this time of nourishment during your pregnancy and your postpartum time frame is so crucial. And it's going to take a big shift, right? Like, it's going to take us listening more carefully and actually doing those things, right? Like, not
Taking action, yes.
shoving those things out if we're able, right? This definitely hit home for me.
There's a whole science. So Ayurveda is fairly well known in the doula world, in the postpartum world, because of the postpartum practices. What hasn't come to more acceptance or awareness is there's a whole protocol for preconception for this exact reason. The health of the mother while she's pregnant is going to affect the health of the pregnancy and postpartum and the child itself. So like, this huge responsibility. And right now we're not in a society that, first of all, has awareness of it, and second of all, has value for it. And the awareness comes first. So I love that you said that you're gearing up even prior, which is like hardly part of our discussion, but that's really where it starts. So yeah, beautiful.
I find that, the whole thing is just, if you think about it, like, as women, chances are, or birthing people, chances are, high that you may have a child, right? Maybe not 100%, but they're there. And yet before we have children, we basically treat ourselves like we're the same as men, like in terms of like how we're working, how we're making ourselves be productive, how we're like really like, let's just work as much of myself as I possibly can. And then we're like, oh, and now also I'm going to make my body have a baby, and that should just be fine. Like, right? Like, despite the fact that it pulls everything out of your bones and right? Like, it should just be fine because I can work just as much and just as, exactly the same as a man. And that's not really, it's interesting because that's not really taking into account the fact that, we are going to put this immense pressure on our bodies to do something amazing. And then once we have the baby, we just expect to go back to that normal. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's just cultural that we sort of lost this or if we intentionally did it or what, but it's kind of a fascinating thing.
I think you hit like the nail on the head where it's like, this is a lot of the experience I've had in my relationship is we should be just as productive as men, but it's like, especially as I have more children, it's becoming more and more apparent in our family unit that there is only so much energy each of us has, and where can we optimize the use of that energy? Is it in production of children? Is it in raising children? Is it in economic productivity, et cetera? And thankfully, if we have a supportive partner, they can take on that economic production, but that's not always the case. But it definitely needs to be part of the conversation that's totally being left out. Is this, they say there's waves of these women's rights movements, and I feel like the postpartum aspect and the supporting the women after are really taking this next level look at where are we headed, because okay, we have a lot of these, we've come a long way, there's always work to be done, we've come a long way, but now when we start to see these like biological differences of like you're taking so much physically out of your body that you're not able to show up in the same way you were before. And it's okay, and there's nothing wrong with you. But how does that look and for you and your family unit, etc. So yeah, I think it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Good conversation.
fascinating to me. I mean, and how as a society we could start to think about, you know, honoring and respecting women and teaching them before they have their babies that, you know, this is like super important and you should take care of yourself because you're going to have a, you know, have this experience. So yeah, I don't know how we've lost that in our culture, but somehow we really have.
Yeah. Yeah. In the chat, someone says, if I wanted to have a child right now, I haven't necessarily been taught what I should do to prepare for that process, right? Like as a first time parent. And I completely agree. Like it's this thing that we, like our OBs, we're only going to for a well woman, or when we get pregnant. Like we're not talking about this preconception time frame. And then after the fact, there's all this chatter about bouncing back or like getting your body back or what. Like, okay, if you had prepared in the first place, and I'm no different, you know, like I didn't prepare. I was like, oh crap, I'm pregnant. You know, like, right? It's like, it hits us by surprise. Like a lot of pregnancies, you know, I'm not even going to venture a guess, but a lot of pregnancies are not planned. And so, you know, like in that childbearing like time frame for any person who is going to be capable of having a baby, we really should have that background knowledge of like, how are you supporting your body in and of itself as a whole? And that then in turn can support your body to support life, right? As you grow another being. And I think this is something that we will see trickle in eventually to, you know, that kind of common talk, but it's just not there yet.
It's not there yet.
It is fascinating. I agree with Jenny. It's just mind-blowing to see.
Yeah, a lot of what I see with infertility is because it's really just as you know, birth control pills are fantastic, but they really mess with your body. There's nutritional deficiency, there's hormone issues, etc. And so having this conversation, and a lot of infertility can be shifted fairly easily, but there has to be a whole mind body shift. So like easy in theory, difficult in practice sort of thing. And I think that we could see a lot less, I mean, of course I'm an advocate for this, but I think we could see a lot less invasive, costly ways to support the desire to have a family too in this way. So not only to have a strong family, but a desire to have a family in general. So yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Erica. We're going to go ahead and take ourselves off of live in just a moment. I want to just shoot out there a little plug for our upcoming gatherings, and then we will continue on just our Zoom chat for another few minutes. Next gathering for us is not next week because there are 5 weeks in June, but the following. So on the 7th of July, we're going to be having our West Valley Village Gathering, Eat to be Stress-Free, 5 ways to try today. This is going to be a great chat, and I know much needed for me, and pulling into this thought process of Ayurvedic support for your system and eating right. Your diet does matter. I posted on the Facebook chat with a winky face because I am, oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's so hard in our day and age to not grab the candy as you check out of the store, right? So definitely something to think about, what you're putting into your body. And then our Central Village Gathering will be after that the following week, followed by a couple more gatherings. Dr. Delliman, who's here today, is going to be our East Valley presenter talking about chiropractic in pregnancy, postpartum, and with baby as well. So we're excited to have you up on our list, Dr. D. And I do want to highlight briefly our ecosystem lunchtime conversations. This is going to be a really important discussion, and this is geared a little bit more for providers, but we also invite all of you moms to come as well. This is going to be on July 9th. This is our second lunchtime conversation. It's from 12 to 1, so hopefully those providers are able to take their lunch break and join us. the impact of COVID-19 on maternal mental health. This is so important. And I think maternal mental health is something we don't talk about enough in general, but definitely impacted greatly by the pandemic. And we're seeing the effects of that now, and we will continue to. So please come and join us for that conversation. And with that, we're going to step off of our Facebook Live. Thank you again, Erica. It's just such a pleasure to hear you talk. If you're watching this on replay, you can post your questions in the comments for Erica, and we'll make sure she gets those.